Well, welcome everyone. Happy end of semester. Hopefully this is a quiet time or you're very close to a very quiet time in the semester. And thank you for joining us. So today we're talking about collaborating for student success, advancing research competencies in writing and literature. I'm Kristina DeVoe, English and Communication Librarian at Temple University. And this virtual event today is brought to you by two special groups. So first off, this group, which is our working group for the research competencies in writing and literature, which currently comprises of myself as chair, Hillary Richardson, Erin Durham, and Dan Coffey. But this group actually has had many members in the past, many of which you see listed down below. This event today is also brought to you by LESA's Virtual Participation Committee, and I want to give a shout out to them for agreeing to take this on and encouraging us. And Margie, you've been absolutely lovely. Thank you. I'm so happy to have worked with you on this. So what are we going to be discussing here today? So today we're giving you kind of like a little bit of a recap on the working group and kind of like what we were asked to do and kind of the work that we've been doing, and so where we are so far, and sort of like where we are in terms of ACRL's kind of checklist or steps that are needed when creating and working on a companion document for the framework. We're also going to use this event as an opportunity to hear from you. We're very eager to get some feedback on the document, and you all hopefully have had an opportunity to take a peek at it. I know I saw lots of anonymous users earlier today looking at the document, so that's great, fantastic. Whether it was the first time you took a look at it or if you've been revisiting it, we're hoping to get some feedback from you today. So we have the chat available. We hope you'll avail yourself to that. We also will be taking advantage of breakout rooms, and so we hope to hear from you. We'll give you instructions and feedback as we go along, but feel free to ask questions in the chat if something comes up. Alrighty, so our charge. When this group was brought together, which was actually back in, let's see, spring of 2016, then LES Chair Amanda Rust called for volunteers to update our research competencies document. So that document that had been around since the mid-aughts, and to kind of update it, thinking about ACRL's then new framework for information literacy, to create a new set of disciplinary literature-focused competencies. When that call went out, there were many individuals who were eager to participate, which was really delightful to know. So after some initial starts and sputters, active work actually took place between fall 2017 and spring 2018. Hillary, Dan, and I were among some of those early volunteers, and we've remained with the group throughout the entire process in different kinds of leadership capacities. So Hillary, I'm gonna pass it over to you to give us a little bit more detail about some of the work that we've been doing.
All right, everybody can hear me? Yes, okay. So after many conversations, as Kristina mentioned, and after sort of figuring out what it is we wanted to tackle, the sum of what we came up with when we revised the document was who the audience was. Originally, the audience was for students and faculty, and I think it was a broad audience.
Okay, good. All right. So I think the last thing I said was the audience was more focused. Did we, that worked? And the organization, did you all hear that part too? No, okay, that's where I'll start. So we reorganized the document. Instead of mirroring the standards, which it sort of did before, we're now mirroring how the frames are set up. So all of the frames are separate, but they address different areas in literature and writing research. And then we focused on creating different dispositions and knowledge practices like the frames have. And we tried to incorporate emerging practices like things from digital scholarship, things from other disciplines, So yeah, those are some of our revisions. Can we go to the next slide, Kristina? We had a lot of work. We spent, you can kind of see what collaborating in a Google Doc with 6 to 10 people looks like here. We worked on kind of making our language very intentional. We spent our meetings workshopping the frames together. And before that, we would comment on each other's remarks. So this is kind of what the sum of all of that looked like. This is sort of the behind the curtain, so to speak. We can go to the next slide. According to the checklist, which we'll reference again later, we had to consult, after we made a sort of complete draft, we had to consult different people, different constituencies that were important to us. So we consulted general membership, so some of you that are here. We consulted with our exec, which I think some of those people are here as well. And we sent our document to select English faculty, some who taught literature, some who taught composition classes, and some who had a digital humanities focus. We reached 12 different institutions doing that, and that was very much individuals reaching out to other people. We also talked to 2 other groups who were revising their standards, the Women and Gender Studies section and the EBSS Communication Studies subsection, I guess. We had about 44% response rate among those groups. So we'll go to the next slide. And some of the things that people told us were that they were really glad to see that we talked about reflection a lot. I hope you see that in the document as well. There were also some questions about what we expected of undergraduates who were becoming literate scholars, information literate scholars. That was the different variety of sources that we listed. It was hard to say a variety of sources without using some examples. And so they were not sure about all of the examples we used. They were also not sure if we were choosing appropriate professional resources when talking about undergraduates. Some kind of get to that level and some don't. And so we tried to be broad, painting broad strokes that way. And then some of them were not sure how much undergraduates need to know about peer review, but they don't really need to know all of the different academia pigeonholes, I guess, when it comes to the peer review system. So like the process of promotion and tenure kind of peeked its way into the document a little bit. So we kind of scaled back just a little bit. They appreciated the word text being used broadly as well. So text referring to images, referring to things that aren't just words on the page, but that can be ideas and so forth. And then of course, because we talked to a bunch of English professors, they had some stylistic suggestions that we paid attention to as well. So that's kind of the summary of our revision process so far.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So I joined the group this year. My name is Erin. And as you can see, the great work the committee did to draft the document to get the feedback, as Hillary talked about. So now we are seeking feedback from LES, from you as we go into the next stage. So we're seeking feedback, and we will share that with the Information Literacy Frameworks and Standards Committee, and then that will go to the ACRL Board eventually. So you can do the next slide. And there is a checklist, if you didn't know. So there is the checklist for reviewing ancillary documents to the framework. And we are following along that path. You can go to the next slide. So there are 18 steps. You can see that we have received feedback from other committees. We have shared it with faculty members in the discipline. And right now we are soliciting comments from librarians and the LES groups specifically. That's where we're at.
All right, so thinking then about like these next steps, we're at that stage where we need feedback from all of you. All of you are kind of in it in the moment. You know, like we all do teaching and we all work with different users. And so the kind of feedback that would best help us out as we continue working on this document kind of relates to how this document is relevant to your own teaching and assessment efforts, as well as like, do you see this document having interdisciplinary applications? So for example, does it address whether that's kind of like segues into digital scholarship, or if that's kind of like creative writing, or if that's rhetoric, if that is other kinds of areas, even if it's kind of like working with primary sources and like your special collections communities, and or if that is working with women's studies, gender studies, or other kinds of related area studies groups. Like, do you see those kinds of applications? And we're also kind of curious in terms of if you see this document in terms of its usefulness in sort of your own curriculum design and creating learning objectives. Ultimately, like that's what we're really interested in, is to sort of see like, is this usable for you in your day-to-day work? So how are we going to find that feedback out and kind of hear from you? So we're going to transition now into an activity where we kind of hand the mic over to all of you and kind of give you an opportunity to share with us your thoughts, as well as to sort of bounce ideas off one another. So here's how this is going to happen. So we're going to very shortly put you all into breakout rooms. Now, in these breakout rooms, you'll have the opportunity to speak out loud if you'd like. You can use video, you can use chat, whatever you're more comfortable with. In each of these breakout rooms, you're going to discuss this document in terms of a single frame. And don't worry, we'll give you that frame. We'll have you talk for about 15 minutes in this kind of environment. We've got some discussion questions to kind of help guide your discussions. And you can see those questions from that URL, the bit.do/les-research competencies. Now, in your breakout groups, we'd like you to appoint a recorder who's going to take some notes for those kinds of discussion prompts. This is where we can capture your ideas, your comments. Keep in mind, when you are in your breakout room, that actually is not recorded. So the only way that we find out kind of like what interests you and what works well for you, or what you have to say about this document, is in that Google document that you share with us. Near the end of the 15 minutes, we're going to ask you to appoint a speaker who is comfortable sharing out some of the things that you talked about in your breakout group. So then we'll kind of spend some time talking about sort of things that you discussed, comments or questions that you have, and then we'll do general debriefing and talk about kind of where we're going to go from there. At any point, you can kind of reach out, ask us for help, and we'll come in and assist. All right, so I'm going to share with you initially some of the questions that we have. Okay, so each group is going to kind of discuss these questions or these prompts in light of a single frame. Right, so some of these prompts include, in what ways can you use the knowledge practices and dispositions in your teaching? So as perhaps maybe you've seen, the knowledge practices and dispositions make up a good portion of the heart of the document. So we're really interested in sort of seeing the usability and feasibility of them. Are they clear? Do they make sense? We're also curious in terms of, would there be any concepts that would be useful to add? Is there something in the document that's missing, particularly in light of the frame that you're examining? Is there something that we didn't consider that we should? Also, can you comment on the audience the document seems to address? As we mentioned earlier, we did take into mind audiences. We want to make sure, did we actually hit that on the nail, or are we missing it just a quite bit? And then finally, we're also curious in terms of, does this document adequately anticipate emerging digital scholarship research methods? So we're interested in sort of the lasting nature of this document. Can it kind of hold the test of time as we go into emerging and new forms of scholarship? Again, you have the URL listed on that slide there that shows you where those prompts are located. So I'm going to ask Lois, could we use this time right now to put everyone into their breakout room? All right, so welcome back. Thank you all for participating in that. As I look through the document, looks like there's a lot of really great feedback. So the group will have a really great time going through this. So I'd like to take some time just to debrief on some of the things that you discussed in your breakout sessions. So hopefully there's at least one person who's comfortable and confident sharing what they discussed. So can I ask some of the things that you discussed in relation to what are some of the ways that you can use these knowledge practices and dispositions in your own teaching? If someone wishes to sort of share what they discussed, you can unmute or you can type in the chat.
Hi, this is Jenny Dale. I am at UNC Greensboro, and I was in the second breakout group. So we looked at information creation as a process, and we talked a little bit about how several of the knowledge practices in particular were things that we could connect directly to teaching that we already do, particularly in terms of helping students distinguish between different types of secondary sources. And also one that I use quite a bit, or that I would say aligns with what I do, is about integrating primary and secondary texts into writing. So integrating sources, paraphrasing, that kind of thing. So we felt like the knowledge practices that were already identified here looked like they matched up really well with what we do.
Great. Thanks so much, Jenny. I see Erin posted in the chat that her group talked about using it for conversations with faculty, and I don't want to put words in Erin's mouth, but I'm guessing that kind of perhaps hints toward as a place to begin dialogue or a way to begin. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing nods. Okay, all right. So I think I can safely say that our group also kind of mentioned that too. Some of the language in here seems to be exciting faculty for those who've maybe seen previews of it, or that the language sort of reflects how they talk about some things. So that's cool to hear too. Anybody else want to chime in? How can you use these knowledge practices and dispositions in your teaching?
Well, as you know, in our group, we talked about the use of alternative assignments in different media and different types of writing. And we were really excited how the document addressed and acknowledged that.
Cool, very cool.
We had a comment also in talking with colleagues, kind of thinking about we can think about what objectives and how we might incorporate more of the objectives in teaching.
Hello, anybody still there?
I think he must have
Did I disappear?
blanked out for a second, but I
Okay.
can see you and hear you now.
Okay, great.
I know mine like kicked me out. I don't know if that's something that other people are experiencing as well.
Right, so I'll repeat my question. Did anyone get the opportunity to discuss the audience? Sort of like, do they feel that the document is sort of addressing or sort of touching upon the right audience or audiences?
Yeah, we felt that it seemed to be addressing faculty or librarians, maybe not students, but we didn't necessarily see that as a problem.
Okay.
A question that somebody in our group had, well, really a comment, but I think it could be a question for everybody, was that there was more of an emphasis on their campus to address gen ed types of information literacy. And I know this document is not necessarily about gen ed, but there are a lot of English classes that count for gen ed, like English 101 and English 102. So does anybody have any thoughts on how these very specific literary research competencies might play into the gen ed core requirements that are on most campuses?
We're redoing our gen ed right now. We're in the middle of a revision, but at present, there is a literature requirement in gen ed for everyone at UNCG. So these sit really nicely with that. It remains to be seen if that will still exist in the new program. It will still be an option, but I don't think we'll probably see quite the level of participation because I don't think everyone is going to be required to have a lit specific course.
So I was in the information has value group, which talks a lot about, so it does, there's a knowledge disposition about citing primary and secondary sources, and that seemed more aligned with like undergraduate, like first year skills, English 100, 101. But then some of the other knowledge practices are definitely more aligned with graduate research, thinking about scholarly publication. So there's kind of a range. So I see it as fitting in, like in my instruction, I do both the first year instruction and then the upper level English classes. So I would just pick and choose the knowledge dispositions as they seem to fit.
Okay, so just reviewing over the chat. So someone notes that they like that the strategic searching emphasizes persistence, mental flexibility, unsuccessful search, and willingness to seek help, and the relevance for that. Very cool, very cool. Well, another question I want to ask, and this wasn't one of the questions in the discussion, but this is something that our group sort of discussed amongst ourselves. We're kind of curious in terms of what are ways to make the document more accessible and inclusive, and any thoughts you might have on that?
One of our breakout group members had good thoughts on some of the highbrow language and to kind of bring it down a little bit. I thought that was a good comment.
So I see in the chat folks are asking accessible or inclusive for whom or of whom or to whom. I'm going to keep it open there, sort of to hear what y'all might have to say. So Erin notes in the chat, acknowledgement of the Western-centric canon and how that's problematic of being inclusive. Okay. I'm trying to recall, I think back when working on the authority is constructed, I think there was notions of inclusivity there, and sort of like who is the authority and how that can shift. Multiple Englishes, yeah, that's good, that's interesting, yes.
We also talked about how the in that authority is constructing contextual section, talking about how sometimes that authority construction is exclusive rather than than necessarily accessible, such as or inclusive. Like we kind of wondered if there should have been more of a discussion of like the sort of tiers of publishing, like, you know, Rutledge, Duke University Press, and then there are you know, Edwin Mellon or something. Like there are these sort of ideas out there about what's more prestigious and what does prestige mean. So that I think might need to be addressed as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Brian. All right, someone notes, appreciates that the document includes persistence in searching. Okay, great, fantastic. Okay. All right, well, so thank you for this debriefing moment. So hopefully it was helpful to hear sort of like what some of the other groups were discussing. Oh, I see one more thing pop up in the chat. Is there anywhere in the document that talks about the value of personal experience in writing? Ooh. Or transferable skills for career or public good? I think making English relevant for the non-traditional student is important as instructors. To communicate that personal experience is valuable. Ooh, personal experience. As I take down notes. All right. Also, on the accessibility front, caution care around the use of the term information doesn't have a lot of meaning for faculty. Okay, all right, good to hear. All right, thank you for those great comments. All right, so kind of moving on then. What are next steps for our group? All right, so now our group will review all of your comments and feedback. So that document is available. Please know that y'all can return to it and add other additional insights. Maybe something that just either you didn't have a chance to say, or maybe the thought comes to you later, or it kind of fully fleshes out later and you want to add it, please do. So we'll review those. So once we review those comments, we'll make any necessary changes to the document. And then at that point, we'll then start to move through those other steps in the checklist. So submitting the document to other relevant parties, so the ILFSC committee, and then further up to the ACRL board. And then hopefully goal is to publish and share the new research competency guidelines and make those available for everyone so we can start using those. I know from some folks in this group that there are some potential research projects on the line, and so folks are eagerly waiting for these competencies to be ready. So we are too. So if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. Like I said, any additional feedback you can share either in that document, or if you feel more comfortable, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to take that feedback too. Thank you all for participating in this special kind of event. Your feedback's so very much welcomed. And I hope all of you have a great end of the semester and enjoy your winter break. And Happy New Year, and see you all. If you're coming to Philly for ACRL Midwinter, hope to see you here. Take care, everyone.